Hello and good morning, everyone. We're super excited to have you here today for our webinar, Grants 101. My name is Bontu Galata, and I'm an entrepreneur ecosystem strategist with ETB. My role is to develop and nurture strategic partnerships with small business support organizations to better understand community needs, facilitate learning opportunities for entrepreneurs, and to create connections within the ecosystem. And I'm also pleased to host today's webinar for you. I'm based in Calgary and I'm curious to know where folks are situated. So please let us know where you're joining us from today by entering your city and town into the chat. And feel free to also include a brief detail about your business if you are, or if you're wanting to share those details. To get us started, and with it being June and Indigenous History Month, I would like to share what reconciliation means to me before reading our land acknowledgement. My lineage is from an Indigenous nation in Ethiopia. I come from the Oromo Nation, one of the largest African nations to roam the earth. We have a very similar history of assimilation into a culture and a way of life that was different than ours. And similar to Indigenous peoples of Canada, my ancestors lived by a certain code of ethics, which the Inuit refer to as Malachite. It means things that had to be done, and it has 4 principles: work for the common good, respect all living things, preserve harmony and balance, and last but not least, plan and prepare for the future. The Oromo refer to this as Safu, a way of promoting moral and ethical order in society. Today, many of our Indigenous elders would say that we have lost our ways. So reconciliation for me is about finding those ways and connecting with my own Indigenous roots through the Indigenous peoples of Canada. So it is an honor to recognize the land that we are on the same way my ancestors would have done, and also acknowledge the many Black and racialized ancestors that were brought over by force and humiliation. For myself and for those of us joining from Alberta, I would like to acknowledge the land on which we are all present is the traditional territory of the Treaty 6, 7, and 8 nations of Alberta, and I acknowledge Treaty 4 and 10. I acknowledge the ancestral territory of the Cree, the Dene, the Blackfoot, the Stoney Nakoda, the Saulteaux, the Ojibwe, the Tsuut'ina, and the 8 Métis settlements, and the homeland of the Métis people. I also acknowledge the land as an act of reconciliation that honors the authentic history of Turtle Island and the original people of this territory. And now it's my pleasure to introduce you to today's speaker and topic. Brianna Blaney is the CEO and co-founder of Pocketed. Money is a leading barrier to innovation and entrepreneurship, especially for women and equity-deserving groups. As an experienced founder, Brianna has lived this pain. She co-founded Pocketed to level the playing field, helping Canadian businesses easily access over $5.9 billion annually in grants, tax credits, and incentives. Since 2021, more than 14,000 companies have used Pocketed to access over $100 million. Together with her team, Brianna is on a mission to eliminate financial barriers for businesses, and we're super happy to have her here for today's session. Excuse me. Throughout the webinar, Brianna will share how to navigate the grant landscape so your business can start leveraging funding today. We'll get to understand what fundable and non-fundable activities are and how to find the most suitable program opportunities. And before I pass it over to Brianna, just a quick note to our audience. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please enter them into the chat at any time, and we'll address as many as we can at the end of the presentation. And following today's presentation, you will receive a follow-up email within a few days with information on how you can access the recording and additional follow-up materials. And again, thank you, Brianna, for sharing your time and expertise with us today. Super excited to have you here, and over to you.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you very much for having me. I'm just going to quickly share my screen and confirm that folks are able to see that. I hope so. If not, please let me know. I'm Brianna Blaney. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Pocketed, and I am coming to you from Fort Langley, British Columbia, which is on the unceded ancestral lands of the Coast Salish peoples. So I'm so glad to be here with all of you today and talking about grants. For anyone that maybe is less familiar with Pocketed, well, I'll start with sharing a bit of an introduction so there's context for you on why this topic is so important and close to my heart. I am a founder. I've built companies that are funded by investors and not funded by investors. And throughout every opportunity I've ever had in building a business, money has been a consistent theme of struggle. It's so hard to find the money that you need to build a business. And building a business, this group of entrepreneurs can likely relate, is so freaking hard as it is. So I'm so glad to have you all here to introduce grants, how you can be accessing this critical source of capital to build your businesses, achieve your goals, reach new milestones, and the role that Pocketed plays in the ecosystem to help you accomplish that. We built Pocketed really to level the playing field and eliminate as many financial barriers as we can. So we are a software platform. When you make an account, and we'll share a code for all of you to access a free account today. But when you make your account, you're going to tell us about your business, and our platform will automatically match you with eligible funding programs that you can access to achieve your business goals. And then we also, of course, provide access to grant writers to help you end to end. But more importantly, let's dive into the content. So Bontu shared a great introduction, but just a quick overview. We want to make sure that you leave here today with a really clear understanding of fundable and non-fundable activities. Giving you and sharing some key considerations so you can assess how real is my grant potential? How much money do I actually have the potential to secure through grants? Yes, there's $5.9 billion. How much of that can I actually expect to realize through my business, particularly if you're early stage or building a small professional services business? And then finally, sharing some tips and tricks to help you be more successful on this path. So I'm going to start with a really quick overview of common funding types, and this won't surprise you. There's 3 types of capital that we talk about the most. Debt and loans, which are repayable, typically with interest. Investors, where you give them a piece of equity or ownership in your business in exchange for capital. This is an equity or dilutive source of capital. And then grant funding, which is often perceived as this magical source that's usually non-repayable and is literally free money for your business. But it is competitive in many cases, so you do still have to win it. With every type of capital, regardless of what type of capital you're pursuing, you need to have a strategy. You have to think about what is the role that this type of capital is going to play in my growth journey. When do I want to be accessing this type of capital? Which type of capital is the right fit for this stage, for that milestone I want to achieve? And that is a piece that we're going to cover and talk a lot about today. And in my own personal experience, I've leveraged every single type of capital you see on this screen. So I've leveraged debt. I have investors in Pocketed. I've used grant funding extensively. And I can share that in Pocketed, at one point in building our business, 95% of our payroll, which at that point was our only cost, was covered by grants. And that was a big role in how we got from an idea to an actual product that was built and live in the market within 14 weeks. And we used grants to do that, and many of you can do the same. We largely leverage something called wage subsidies, which I'm going to share more about today and talk about some specific programs. And we've also used, surprisingly, or perhaps not, given we're in the business of this, but we've used significantly more government funding, 2 times more government funding than we raised from investors. So it's a great opportunity for you if you have some capital, whether it's money you've invested, revenue you've earned, to accelerate your runway. And that does bring me to something I think is important to talk about that I wish we talked about more. Yes, we love this type of capital, and there is still an expectation that you're generating a rate of return. So every type of money that you see up here expects something from you in return. Debt and loans is pretty straightforward. It's an interest rate. Investors want at least a 10x return on their investment. Grant funding, you have to create a benefit to Canada. So why do we love this type of capital so much for grants? Well, because grants don't take equity in your business, it means you retain ownership of your business. That's critical. Non-debt means you don't actually have to pay back the funds. They're non-repayable. When you're early or you're scaling, having money that you don't have to pay back is such a gift. And then some grants you compete for, I mentioned that some of them are competitive, but other programs are just an entitlement. If you're eligible and you apply with an eligible project, you get the money. Tax credits are a great example of this. So you don't always have to be such a big lift. And yes, it's important to talk about these types of capital that will fund your business, but I would be remiss not to tell you the real MVP when it comes to money, which is revenue. There is nothing more powerful than earning money from your customers. It validates what you're building. It is it's something that you're earning. It's money that you get to spend back in building your product, your business. So it is the real MVP. And I want to call that out because we talk lots about how we bring in external money to our businesses, but earning money needs to still be our primary focus and for all of us in our building journey. Okay, so lay of the land. Yes, our government is really generous. We distribute $5.9 billion every year in government funding. That's grants, tax credits, and incentives. And it's for all types of businesses. One of the most common misconceptions we come up against over the last 3.5 years is that money is just for tech companies. It's just for people doing innovation. And that's not true. I've accessed grants for my services business, just like I've accessed grants for my technology company. And yes, the grants you can access may look a little bit different, but I want to assure all of you that regardless of the kind of business that you're building, that is almost the lowest importance of what's going to make your business eligible for funding. And we're going to talk a lot more about that because it's a critical piece that we so often misunderstand. Right now, there's more than 1,600 programs open and accepting applications in the country. 1,610 programs that you could potentially pursue. That's a lot of opportunity to fund your business. But grants can be hard because they come and they go or they change, often with very little warning. And that is why we built Pocketed, so you can get access to the information that you need in real time. It stays current, it stays up to date, so you're not wasting your time pursuing programs that are no longer open or where the criteria doesn't actually align for your business and your objectives in your business. So what does a grant-ready company look like? And this is almost a self-assessment I encourage all of you to follow as I'm going through this. First, you really fundamentally have to be incorporated or registered in Canada. It doesn't have to be incorporation. You may be a different structure, but you have to be a registered Canadian business. You have to have some access to capital, and this often confuses folks. So what this means is that you either have made money, you've invested some of your own money, you have raised money from investors, you have some debt or a line of credit you're able to access. You have to have some money. And the reason for this is that most grants in Canada work on either a reimbursement or a matching structure. So what that means is that either you're going to spend $5,000 before you get the money back from the government, or you're going to put in $1, and for every dollar you put in, they may put in $1 as well. So that means you do have to have some access to capital in order to use these programs because it's based on your spend. Very few programs exist to just give you a magical pool of money. It's everyone's favorite. It's what we get asked about a lot, but it really is hard to find outside of some accelerator and incubator programs, typically affiliated with universities or post-secondary institutions or competitions, which there are many of, with a very low success rate. So manage your time on those. And then finally, you either have employees on payroll or you are willing to add people to payroll. And payroll is this really big blocker for folks. And we experience this literally every day. People, and myself included, I remember being very intimidated by the idea of payroll. I didn't want to have to deal with that. I didn't understand it. Felt like a lot of paperwork, another thing to do as a busy founder. And those are all honest and totally relatable sentiments. And when you're willing to put people on payroll, if you need to add people, capital, or resources into your business, that is one of the single most fundable activities you can do in this country. Over $1 billion a year is distributed just in programs under $30,000 each for hiring. So there's a ton of money out there for that specific purpose. Now that's the baseline criteria. There is also things that make your business what we call highly eligible or higher potential to access even more or bigger programs. And that includes businesses in priority industries. Our government is absolutely prioritizing investments in clean tech, agriculture, life sciences, technology, manufacturing, logistics, the ones that you hear a lot about in the headlines. That's probably not surprising. If you're investing in projects with an ESG focus, there's sometimes money on a project basis for that. And really, as a baseline, you have to be growing or evolving. That can mean that you're hiring, you're expanding your business, you're digitizing, you're doing research, or innovating. There has to be something in your business that is more than business as usual. So when we get to the breakdown of fundable versus non-fundable expenses, what you're going to see is that a non-fundable activity is, generally speaking, anything and everything that is business as usual. So I'll break that down even further. And we'll start introducing that concept here. So what the heck is a fundable activity? Well, fundable activities are those things that create a benefit to Canada in some way. For example, if you're hiring, that means that you're creating jobs in Canada, which the government wants. They want to motivate that. They want to incentivize that. So they provide wage subsidies. If you're expanding beyond Canada, you're growing our GDP and you're building an international presence, you can access market expansion funding for helping you with export. If you're investing in new innovation, researching new solutions, you can access R&D funding for that. And we'll break down an even more detailed list here, but this is a great thing to screenshot. Absolutely. You can also access this full list with more information in a funding roadmap tool that we have, totally free to access. I think William's able to share a link for all of you to access that funding roadmap tool. I encourage you to download it. It's going to help you with this information and building out your strategy. But what the heck are fundable activities in like examples? So research and development, that could be developing innovative products and services, conducting scientific or technological research. Job creation, you're hiring new people, particularly students. I will caveat this, something that we find creates friction in this space is that most hiring grants in Canada will only fund Canadian citizens, refugees, and permanent residents. There are some programs that are exceptions to that, but they're very unusual. And we understand and want to acknowledge that that does cause friction. But it's a great way for you to build and grow your team and access skills to help you get further faster. Technology adoption. So if you're implementing new technology to improve efficiency in your business, there's often funding support for that. Export and market expansion. So if you're exporting into a new international market you want to expand into one piece of the United States into India, there's a lot of funding that you can access around those types of activities to do things like attend trade shows or translate your marketing materials into the language of the geography that you're expanding into. Promotional events, all of those types of activities are fundable. Training and skill development, you're upskilling your team, that's fundable. Environmental sustainability, if you're implementing eco-friendly practices, you can get capital for that also. Community and social or innovation and startups, big one. There's a lot of money for startups and innovative exercises and activities in your business. So yes, you are in a highly fundable category. Your biggest sticking point, if you identify as an early stage startup, is going to be largely limited by your access to existing capital. That is typically what will be your biggest barrier to accessing larger programs in full transparency. But generally speaking, starting up is very fundable, including in protecting intellectual property. There are 12 programs in the country right now that will fund your legal bills. They will literally pay your lawyers to do things like get trademarks for your business. So there's a ton of capital and you can stack them, meaning you don't just use one, you can use many of them and stack them together to help you cover more of your costs over a longer period of time. Community and social impact, we do want to see investments in community, so there's funding around that. Energy efficiency, many programs come out around rebates in this. There's some new ones coming out around furnaces, so probably not the right demographic for that, but if you do have a furnace in your home, look into those subsidies. Agriculture and agribusiness is huge, adopting modern farming practices, introducing technology into agriculture. We're investing heavily in that as a country. And then manufacturing upgrades. We need to domesticate more manufacturing. The government's very motivated for that. You see that reflected in how they're putting money into programs right now. So those are examples of what are fundable activities. But where there is fundable, there is always non-fundable. And this list tends to really annoy people. So we will likely get questions about this list, and I am happy to answer those, but wherever it's too specific to your business, we're going to have to go offline in full disclosure, but please do share your questions, even if it does feel like it's just for you. So anything that is business as usual is not fundable by grants. No, they are not going to pay for business as usual. Routine operational expenses like salaries, rent, utilities, anything like routine overhead, not fundable. Marketing and advertising, for the most part, if it's just part of your ongoing business operations, is not fundable. I'm going to offer you a reframe on that. Getting money, like a pot of money to spend on marketing, not fundable. But getting money to hire a marketer is fundable. Highly, highly fundable to hire a new marketer. So there are other ways that you can think about this that are perhaps a little bit more creative. There are very few programs that will fund existing employees or family or founders for that matter. So you're generally not going to get money for that. Where grants want to create new jobs, that's why, for anyone that's wondering. And they want there to be arm's length so that you're not just hiring, your mom, your sister, your brother, your niece, etc. So we want to think about here, one program type that will fund existing employees is student grants. So if you have an employee that's going back to school, you can often access wage subsidies so long as they meet the eligibility criteria, and your business does also. And we have done that ourselves in all of my companies, actually. So it's a great way to subsidize people that are going to be back in school. Debt repayment, you're not going to get funding for that. General business maintenance. So if there's no clear impact on growth or innovation, it's not going to fund it. And then personal expenses, not fundable. Of course, they are not fundable generally as a business. And then buying a business. We get that question a lot. I want to buy this company. That's incredibly exciting. Grants are not the right channel for that. So we encourage you to talk to folks like ATB Financial or whoever else you have in your lending network. BDC is another example where you can access debt specifically for the purpose of buying businesses. That's often quite friendly and patient debt. So these are not fundable activities. Grants are complex. And I want to help us understand that just because your business is eligible for a grant doesn't mean it's relevant. And that is where this notion of fundable activities comes in. You may see when you create your Pocketed account that you're eligible for 150 programs. 150 programs are absolutely not a fit for you. We'll talk more about that. But you want to understand, where do I have to spend money in my business to achieve that next milestone? How do I find grant funding for those activities in my business? Because otherwise grants can be very distracting. Your funding strategy is going to help you build that. And that funding roadmap will walk you through how to build that and think through that for yourself. Grants are really cyclical and they're time sensitive. So they come up sometimes 3 times a year. Those student grants I've mentioned come up 3 times a year. They're pretty predictable, but they require a level of urgency because they're competitive. Everybody wants them. Many of them will award money on a first come, first served basis, which means that you want to be ready to apply the minute that program opens. Pocketed helps you do that because we make sure you know when those programs are opening, that you're on top of those funding cycles. Sometimes you have notice that programs are opening. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes you've gotten notice that an application you've spent 3 weeks working on is going to close sooner. Sometimes you don't hear until the day before or after it's closed. Pocketed helps to overcome that for you as well. And then there's the reality that funders have this stated criteria that you'll see in Pocketed, but they also have all this unstated criteria, which you'll also see in Pocketed through our insights from working with different funders across the country. So it's hard to navigate grants and make sure that you're set up for success. Pocketed will help you do that, both through our software. For anyone here that is early stage, it's enough for you to DIY and self-serve. For those of you that need a little bit more help, we can help you with that too. But I want to acknowledge that grants are complex. And we built this tool to help you navigate that complexity on your own. So we know and have confidence that you are able to be successful if you prioritize thinking with urgency, being critical with what programs are relevant for you, and either building relationships with funders or taking the time to understand what programs are actually looking for. And Pocketed, again, will help you do that. So let's talk more about understanding your individual business grant potential. We've talked about the landscape. We've got a good lay of the land of what fundable and non-fundable looks like. Now let's understand whether our businesses are highly eligible for grants and how we can think about that. So there are very few absolutes in grant funding. I want to be very clear about that up front. And that, again, is what makes this landscape so complex to navigate. So if you are looking for one-on-one support, our team can provide that to you. hello@hellopocketed.io is our contact info. But let's actually go through an exercise together. So literally pull out a piece of paper, open a note on your computer, and let's work through this together. And these are questions that you can ask yourself right now to self-assess. So first of all, let's start by understanding your current state. Is your business incorporated? Are you registered as a Canadian business? That's a yes or no. Are you currently generating revenue? If yes, how much revenue did you generate in your last 12 months? Think about that. Another way to think about that is, how much revenue did you declare on your last tax filing? Was it more than 100K? More than 100 million? That 100 million mark matters because it sizes you out of lots of programs. That 100,000 mark matters because it sizes you in to lots of programs. It doesn't mean there's not grants for you if you're under that 100,000 mark. There are. I can tell you we used hundreds of thousands of dollars in funding while we were pre-revenue. But the bigger you get, the more you're going to unlock because you'll be able to demonstrate the ability to match those funds. So it's going to unlock more opportunity for you. Do you have or are you hiring employees on payroll? On payroll. That big daunting thing. And then do you have access to capital? Again, that can be money that you've earned through revenue, raised through investors, access through debt or a line of credit. It can be your own personal savings that you're putting into your business. But do you have access to capital? Because if you answered yes to these questions, you are absolutely ready and eligible to be looking at grants, and you should be looking at grants. Now let's think about how we identify relevant programs. And that starts by understanding, again, what are the milestones you're trying to achieve in your business? And what are the activities you need to invest in on a day-to-day basis to help you achieve that milestone? These are some examples. Are you hiring in the next 12 months? How many hires? What positions? Do you plan to start exporting outside of Canada this year? Are you investing in research and development or innovation? Are you pursuing any green initiatives or projects? It could be retrofitting your building. It could be implementing a new compost system into your food truck. We've seen people receive funding for that. And are you training your team? Do you plan to invest in training? Because that's super fundable in this country. If the answers that you have there is going to help you more quickly identify the relevant programs for your business. Because as I mentioned, there's more than 1,610 programs open today, right now, accepting applications in this country. You may match with 173 eligible programs. Of that, likely 3 are going to be truly relevant for your business right now. And that is where the critical thinking and understanding those investments and what it's going to take for you to be successful is so important. You are busy. You are building a business. You are trying to figure it out. It is freaking hard. You are doing the hard work of climbing up the stairs because there is zero elevator to success. You are doing the work. So you can make this process easier on yourself by being really self-aware and pragmatic and being clear on what it's going to take to achieve success. This will help you find those 3 programs that are the most relevant for your business, and you can focus your time, energy, and resources on those programs to start. And that's going to help you. And then the final piece that I'll say is, how will your project benefit Canada? So I talked already about how every type of capital expects a rate of return. Investors want a big, huge exit. Debt wants their money back with interest. Well, the government wants you to create a benefit to Canada. And that's a final really key consideration for you. So the framework of your grant strategy, if anyone's already downloaded that tool, you'll see this. But the framework of what you're going to work through is the three key components of a funding strategy. What are your projects and initiatives that you're working on in your business? What are the timelines that you're tackling those? That's going to help you understand when you want to be looking for funding. Because unfortunately, the government doesn't care about our needs on timing. They really care about when they plan to close a program. So if we miss a deadline, they're not opening it up for us again. So that's going to help you understand how to marry those pieces together. And then the final component, again, to emphasize, probably going to be tired of hearing me say this, but what is the benefit to Canada? Because if you can articulate why that project has a bigger benefit than just helping your business grow, the government's not going to see it. And it's going to be really hard to be competitive for some of this funding. Next, we're going to dive into some specific examples of programs that may be relevant to some of you in the room. And I know that was a question that was posed leading into the session today, was which programs should I be looking at? And we're going to go over a handful. It's impossible to make sure they're all relevant for all of you. So we just chose a few that we think are generally a good fit for many companies. So the first one is Alberta Innovates. Alberta Innovates is a funder that provides a ton of different programs. One of their programs is a voucher program, and it provides support for business and technology development to accelerate commercialization in your business. Applications are reviewed on a rolling basis, and funding is open but often allocated quickly. This money is competitive. So it's important to build a relationship with the funder. You may want to work with a grant writer on how you can have the most compelling application. Whenever it's competitive, it's a great case to work with somebody to help you on that application, but these programs are powerful. The Clean Tech Internship by Career Launcher. This is an example if you plan to hire and you're in the clean tech space. This is an example of a program that will subsidize wages to the tune of $30,000. It's a lot of money to help you hire. Applications typically open a number of months before your intern is going to start working. They're very, very competitive. You do need to identify a candidate, and you must hire someone in science, technology, engineering, or mathematics, so STEM. But these programs are so juicy. This fits under a category and an umbrella of digital skills for youth. So it is youth funding, and Pocket had used half a dozen of these at one point to hire developers to help us build our platform. So combinations of students and youth, and I can attest to how important and valuable these are. But again, it's critical to move fast. So you want to be on top of this in the Pocketed platform to know and be the first to know when these programs open. The Canada Digital Adoption Plan to grow your business online. Great program if you are looking, if you're over the $30,000 mark in revenue, first and foremost, there are some threshold criteria, but it's a great one because it's a good intro to grants. It's fast to apply, less than 5 minutes. There's different funders across each province. So I know not everyone here is from Alberta, though the majority of you are. There are funders across the country, and they each offer a slightly unique value proposition. So pick the right one for you. Many of them do require you to be located in their province. So that may limit your options, but it allows you to add e-commerce functionality to your business. So it could be adding a shopping cart. We've used it to do a translation project when we needed to translate Pocketed from English to French, and it allowed us to do that. So this can be a fabulous resource. It's $2,400. It will literally pay for software for you. So awesome. We highly encourage you to pursue this grant as a quick win for yourself if you haven't already. And then NRC IRAP. Anyone here from the innovation space has undoubtedly heard of the IRAP program. IRAP is a funder, not just a program. It's an entire organization. And funding is distributed on an ongoing basis. Their fiscal year resets April 1st every year, along with the federal government. And we love IRAP. But IRAP is often deeply misunderstood. They work more like a venture fund than they do like a grant agency. So they expect you to build a relationship with them. I spoke on a panel yesterday with what's called an ITA, an Industrial Technology Advisor. So these are folks that work in IRAP. They build a relationship with you. They make funding decisions. They manage their own portfolio clients, and they come out of industry. So they have actual experience doing what we're all doing, which is huge. And we'll talk about why I think that's so huge in just a sec. But to finish my thought, I spoke yesterday on a panel with an ITA, and he was sharing the numbers that IRAP interacts with about 20,000 companies every year. They'll interact a little bit more fully with about 10,000. And of those, overall, about 20% of companies may get some sort of funding from IRAP. So that's important to understand that it's by no means an entitlement. It's not a guarantee. And it does require you to demonstrate traction, to build a business, to demonstrate the ability to grow as a result of this funding. But oh my gosh, it's powerful. And many of us will have heard of their innovation funding. But IRAP has dozens of programs, and Pocketed has benefited not just from the funding that we all want to hear about in their youth hiring grants, but also from IP funding, access to advisors, access to AI consultants that they pay on your behalf. So there's so many ways to access value out of IRAP beyond the funding. So if you are in a position where you think IRAP could be a fit for your business, you do have to go through their concierge intake. There is no way around it. They'll match you with an ITA that has relevant experience in your field, because again, that advisory piece is so critical and something we've benefited from, absolutely. And then you can start building that relationship, demonstrate progress, much like you would to an investor, so you are competitive to be considered for funding when they have the ability to award new funds. And ask them questions about how you can overcome obstacles in your business. Our ITA, years before he gave us money, helped us put Pocketed in front of people to validate the idea long before we got any money from them. So the value for IRAP is so beyond money. And I want to really emphasize that because I think it's, again, broadly misunderstood. So huge, very valuable. ITAs have a lot of power. We want to build good relationships, and you want to treat them like an investor. So generally speaking, how do we set ourselves up for success? And then we're going to go through a few case studies and open up questions because I want to make sure we can get through all of your questions today. So here are some tips to set yourself up for success. First of all, understand and be pragmatic and honest with yourself about your true grants potential, and then strategize accordingly. This is a shorter version of that checklist I asked you to pull out a piece of paper and work through with me. So are you incorporating Canada? Do you have employees on payroll? Do you have access to capital? If yes, you are grant ready, full stop. Then to pick whether or not you're really highly eligible, are you in a priority industry, and are you investing in fundable activities? If yes, you're highly eligible for grants. Make it a priority. If you're in that highly eligible category and you don't have time to invest in grants yourself, you may benefit from our concierge product, which is built just for you to do it for you and alongside you. So consider and be honest with yourself here. What's the benefit to Canada of your project? If you can't answer that question, they are not going to fund you. Give the government a reason to fund you. They want to help you. Grants are a long game. It's often a lot of hurry up and then wait. And this is why building a grant strategy is so critical. And that free funding roadmap tool will absolutely help you. Pocketed's software will help you stay on top of information. because you wait for a program to open, and then it might only be open for a matter of hours before it's fully subscribed and closed again. And then you're waiting for years sometimes. That's true in the publishing sector. Really juicy grants that come about every 3 years. If you miss it when it opens, you're SOL. You're not getting that funding for another 3 years, and there's nothing you can do about it. Even our favorite student grants, you have to plan 4 months in advance for. So grants are not a just-in-time, real-time, last-ditch effort for funding. It doesn't work like that. You have to play the funding game on their timelines. It's hard to start, but getting started is the most important step. We hear a lot, I don't have payroll, I'm intimidated by payroll. Interns are too hard to onboard, I don't want to hire students. I don't have time. Well, in answer to those, get a payroll system. Wave Apps is an awesome solution. We use it ourselves. It's super cost effective. Send us an email, hello@hellopocketed.io. We can send you a link to get you some complimentary access to that tool. It's awesome. It's not complicated. They'll handle the CRA for you. It's great. They'll do all your direct deposits. It's awesome. Interns are too hard to onboard. Well, we found that too. So we ended up building a repeatable onboarding structure for one role, for a marketing internship role, and consistently hired fundable students into that role. I don't have time for grants. I don't have time to apply. Hire a grant writer. Pocketed will help you do that. Because if you don't, you're literally leaving money on the table. And I don't know about you, but I know for myself as a founder, I can't afford to do that. It's not an option. So give yourself a chance. You have to be flexible. It is hard to get started, but get freaking started. We can handle some of it off your plate, but you do have to be invested in it. And then my final tip is you got 2 choices. You can do the work or you can hire someone to do the work. That's generally true in life. Let's get really real. We've all experienced the shift in the economy over the last really 2 years. It's harder to access investor money. Debt's more expensive. Grants are also more competitive. So programs that we historically saw people and even ourselves had success doing on our own are now having to hire grant writers to be more competitive in. We see programs fully subscribed in 24 hours, no more money. That is really hard, and it's made grants even more challenging. Everyone's being inundated. So you can write your own applications, but working with experts is going to help you position yourself more competitively, even if you do it once and then repurpose the content they built for you. If you're super early stage, that's often not an option for you to spend the money. I get it. Work with someone on a success-based structure. Work with our AI tools to help you do it better. There are absolutely resources that are going to help you do it, but if ultimately you know you're never going to do it on your own, hire someone. Absolutely hire someone, because you'd rather have 80% of money than 100% of nothing. So it's totally worth it, and it gives you a chance. So Pocketed Solutions, for anyone wondering how it works, our software, we're going to give you a code momentarily that's going to make it totally free for you to access. Use it. Please use it. It gives you enough information to do this on your own. Pocketed Concierge is only available to highly eligible companies. It's gated. It's an invite-only solution because we offer a funding guarantee or your money back. So it's an invite-only solution. And then grant writing. You can access expert grant writers for every single program. We white label grant writing for some of the big 4 accounting firms. We provide grant writing across the country with huge success rates. So I'd be more than happy to support your own efforts as well. And we'll share some examples. I think it's helpful to see what success looks like in funding. This is Alberta-based nonprofit. They're expanding nationally. We helped them secure $455,000 through our Pocketed Concierge solution. They got a huge Red Cross grant. They're building technology to scale their social impact, and they've pursued hiring subsidies and corporate competitions through Pocketed. So lots of ways to help you access capital, even if you're pre-revenue like these folks. This is a counseling practice based in BC. They've accessed more funding from the government than they've earned in revenue. So I think that's always an interesting example to see. They've hired subsidized employees. They've done training for their current staff. They've built a mental health app, an MVP of that. They've made the semifinals in corporate competitions with their grant identification and review support. So it's helped them get more money. Trucking and logistics company, they're huge, over $100 million in annual revenue. And yes, even they still want grants, because who doesn't want this free money to help you build your business? They're an Alberta-based company that operates nationally and have focused exclusively on wage subsidies with Pocketed. An e-commerce cosmetics company has gotten over $30,000. It was actually to hire their first employee. So those types of success stories for me as a founder are some of my favorites, achieving meaningful growth, but also big milestones in your growth journey. And then they're also pursuing competitions, market expansion, and digitization funding. And then finally, we'll end with this example. A life-saving hardware company has secured over $150,000 with support from Pocketed Concierge. So they've been very, very successful, over $1 million in annual revenue, and they're accessing wage subsidies, different competitions, and they've been very, very successful. So I think it's important to understand that there is money out there for all types of businesses, whether you are early stage, professional services, in the health space, in the e-commerce space, product companies, trucking companies, manufacturing. There's money out there for all of us. And what you're seeing as that consistent thread is that it's more about how they're spending money. So I'll share the code up on the screen, and then I think we're going to get into questions. But if you are interested in creating a Pocket account, you can do so completely free. I think William's going to share this information in the chat as well. ATBX Grants 101, and that's going to get you access to a free Pocketed account, forever free to access our software. So we totally encourage you to take advantage of that. I am going to unshare my screen now so I can see what's going on in the Q&A side.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brianna. That was a lot of information. I'm like taking notes and listening, and it was just amazing. Yes. And I also just want to say thanks for explaining the IRAP. Like just the explanation of what the grant and how it works, because it is oftentimes like we just know about it at a high level, but there's a lot more to it than just that. So thank you for taking the time to do that. And we'll get into questions. I don't think you can see the questions, but we'll have them posted. We're having a little bit of a tech issue, but our team in the back end is curating the questions.
Awesome. Thank you.
So I'll go through those with you. And maybe I'll start off with a question that was submitted during registration. And the question is, are there grants available for hiring specifically seniors, so 65 plus or 55 plus? Because there's lots of grants available for hiring students and wage subsidies and such. Yeah. But is there anything for seniors that you know of?
So hiring for seniors is a gap in the wage subsidy space, and this causes a lot of friction. We see hiring grants focus in on youth. We see hiring grants focus in on students. We see hiring grants focus in on those that are unemployed, and then really deep academic research projects. So that tends to be where we see the government investing in funding. There was a program that funded seniors 2 years ago, but the funding was oversubscribed and it hasn't come back. That being said, depending on your province, you are able to access unemployment funding for a senior the same way you could anyone else. So they would be able to access that funding so long as they met the eligibility criteria, but it's admittedly a gap and something that eventually Pocketed hopes to be able to use our data to help advocate and encourage the government to reconsider some of our allocation on the hiring grant side, but it's a gap currently.
Awesome. Perfect. That's great. And I believe this was a comment that was made while you were talking about exporting. And it was question around or comment around, so we cannot use funding for overseas virtual assistance with some of the grants that are available, or do you know?
Yeah, no. So generally speaking, any subsidies that exist are going to expect you to create a benefit within Canada. So that means that you are funding work, employees, salaries, contractors, all of it in Canada. And that's a really important distinction. You will almost never, outside of export funding, you will almost never find funding that's going to allow you to spend it outside of the country. Export funding is a unique example of that. But generally speaking, you're not going to see virtual assistance considered an eligible expense under that type of program.
Awesome. Perfect. And then on the topic of fundable activities, are there any available for startup stage? So early stage startups.
Yes. And I would put back to that person who asked that question, or if it's just a general question, generally speaking, yes. But again, if we think about not just what your business is eligible for, but what types of programs are relevant for you to be accessing, that's where the magic's going to come from. So where are you spending money to build your startup? Do you need to hire a developer? Do you have to hire a lawyer to help you with incorporation, IP strategy? What are you actually spending money on? That question is going to help you determine which programs are actually relevant for you.
Awesome. And I think you went through this throughout your presentation, but really having a plan prior to even going on and applying for grants, because you kind of have to know and plan in advance for what you're looking for in order to, access some funds. So
yeah, exactly. I mean, you can always fly by the seat of your pants, of course, but you're going to be more successful if you're thoughtful about what do I actually need, which types of programs are going to be relevant, when are those programs available? Because some programs open up multiple times a year. Again, hiring grants are a good example of that. They reliably open 3 times a year for student hiring grants. So if you know you need to hire an intern for the fall, you want to be starting to look for that intern in May. So when all of the hiring opportunity or the grant opportunities open in June, you get to apply first and give yourself a better chance of success. So yes, you can fly by the seat of your pants. I'll be honest, I've had stages of doing that myself, but you'll be more successful when you're planning for it because you won't miss deadlines and you'll be first at submitting applications, which of course increases your success rate when it's a grant program that reviews applications on a rolling basis and awards funding as they receive apps.
Absolutely. Perfect. And he also talked about community and social impact. What are some examples of those?
Yeah, so we see a lot of funding being allocated into various Indigenous initiatives right now. So, for example, and this I think is relevant with Indigenous History Month, but there are different programs that will fund murals that engage Indigenous artists. So, there are certainly different opportunities to get involved. And then there's this whole other subset of nonprofit funding and or funds that will allow you to tackle a project that's relevant for your community to engage a specific demographic, whether it's at-risk youth. So community and impact funding can be challenging because it's distributed on a specific cause basis. So very rarely is it just a general, I'm doing something good for my community. It's very much I'm trying to bring better access to mental health resources to this rural community or to Indigenous peoples. And you'll see funding projects or calls for applications based on those specific mandates. So it tends to be mandate specific. And anyone that is in that category of interested in social impact funding, I would encourage you to join our team. We do office hours totally free a couple times a week where you can ask some of those questions and they can encourage you and teach you on how to find those funding opportunities in the platform.
Awesome. And maybe just a follow-up on that. Would they have to be like a social enterprise in order to access those, or can they?
Depends. So every grant has their own criteria. Oftentimes we see those either distributed to people doing projects in their community, groups that get together, so collaborations that are coming together, which can be, I think, intimidating for people. So it's often a requirement that there's a nonprofit partner, a for-profit partner, and one other partner may be required as well. And that's pretty common. So, if you are looking at community-based funding, you need to think quite critically. And again, it is more involved. It's also super competitive. So I encourage you, that's a good example of when you probably want to book time with a grant specialist.
Awesome. Perfect. All right. So grants from the past, can they be covered or is it only new ones?
Yeah, unfortunately, Adam, grants only cover new expenses. So there's grants will only cover expenses that you incur, eligible expenses that you incur after signing what's called the contribution agreement, which is your contract with the funder that stipulates this is the amount of funding you're getting. This is what you commit to doing from a reporting standpoint. This is the period of time that you'll be funded for and the expenses you'll be funded for. Only those expenses that are included explicitly in the contribution agreement will be funded. And they are real diligent. So for example, if you have hired a student intern, for example, in the past on payroll, and then they are graduate and you want to now hire someone on a youth funding grant because they're graduated, so they're now eligible for other types of funding, and you tell the funder they're a net new employee, you haven't worked with them before because you haven't, they were an intern before, and then you submit your pay stubs, you've signed a contribution agreement, you submit your pay stubs, and they see that there was previous earning history on that pay stub, they will invalidate your entire agreement. So it's important to be super upfront. And that's where working with grant specialists can help, because you can also tell the funder, this person was a student intern. Now they're graduating. This grant would allow us to hire them full-time permanent. And you will often find funders that say, great, we can make that work. And then you have that communication history. It was done up front and you're able to then move forward. But yes, generally speaking, it's only for net new activities. Adam, the one other program to consider if you're in the innovation space, if any of your historical spend was on innovation-based activities, you may be eligible for the SHRED tax credit, which is an innovation tax credit, which roughly gets you about 60 cents back for every dollar that you spent on eligible activities, and it is phenomenal. You have 18 months to claim it based on your annual filing of your taxes, so your fiscal year end. And that program, if you think you might be eligible or the work's been an innovation, reach out to our team. They'll jump on a call with you and walk you through it and help you assess whether there could be an opportunity, because that literally gives you checks and refunds. And like, we get hundreds of thousands of dollars back from the government every year and don't pay federal income taxes because of that program. So I encourage you to look into that. I think you might be in the innovation space.
Perfect. That's really great information. And you're mentioning about the expertise on your team, and you also offer grant writing services as well. So I just want to jump to a question around for grant writing, will the fee structure be disclosed prior to commitment to this service, or how do you access, or how do we, the audience, access to this information?
Yeah, Corey, it's a great question. Absolutely. The funding or the fee structure for every single grant writing project we do is super transparent. There's a statement of work. There is a conversation to validate whether it's even a relevant and eligible program for your business, if we think you're competitive for that program. And then you will receive, of course, a proposal of how we can work together, a statement of work that is really transparent with no fine print on what we expect that to look like, so that we are both on the same page. We understand that when you're building a business, this is risk capital that you're spending. So where possible, we often will offer at least a portion of the fee due on success. Increasingly, there's an upfront deposit required to ensure we're both aligned with skin in the game, but try to weight it more heavily on success-based fees, in recognition that it's hard as a founder. And this is something that Aria, my co-founder, and I really advocated for. It's so freaking hard. Like, it's so hard. And there are days that feel harder than others. There's no question. And I'm coming off a week where I've had some of those days. So my empathy for founders is really high this week, as it always is, but it's especially high this week. So yes, we try to make it work and make it accessible for you.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you for that. All right. So next question, would market expansion include if we normally offer services in Alberta, but have been asked to expand to services in Ontario, so within Canada?
Yeah, Diane, I wish. Domestic expansion is not funded under most export programs. The one exception, there are some programs within the province of Quebec for Quebec-based businesses to provide their services outside of Quebec, but that's the only province that offers juicy interprovincial funding programs. So it's admittedly a bit of a gap. So what I would think about if you are looking to expand, Diane, is asking that critical question of what's it going to take to expand? Is it going to take having someone to do marketing in that new market? Is it going to take a translation component, because we're going to do work in Ottawa and it needs to be bilingual? So ask yourself some of those questions about what's it going to take to be successful in that export, and think about other ways you can achieve that same outcome. So you might not be able to access export funding to pay for that marketing expense, but you might be able to hire someone and use a wage subsidy to get them to help you with that work. So no, there's not export funding, but there is other types of funding that could help you accomplish the same goal.
Excellent. All right. And then I'm going to try to combine two questions in one, which I think you've already answered, but just to confirm. First question is, with marketing and advertising, is it fundable activity to hire a contractor / vendor to complete a marketing project? And then the second question is, does a business need to be incorporated to apply for grants?
Yeah, so no, you do not necessarily need to be incorporated to apply for grants. So what I'll share is that on average, if you're incorporated or a registered business, not necessarily incorporated, but registered, you match on average with 77 programs. If you are not incorporated or not registered in Canada, on average, you match with 17. So there definitely are a handful of programs that you can access, but it's way more limited. So no, it's not always a prerequisite, but it's often a prerequisite, particularly for the bigger programs. Hiring grants sometimes don't require it. So they can be a good example where you could pursue funding without it needing to be a registered business. But to answer your question, Bantu, around the can I hire a contractor, there are very few programs that will fund you to hire a contractor. Especially on the marketing side. Yes, there are some on the innovation side. That SHRED program I mentioned is a good example. Even IRAP to some extent. They want to create headcount in IRAP, and the government wants to create employees and jobs in general. So they always fund more, better, higher percentages when it's employees, but occasionally you'll get some approval for contractors as well, just often at a lower rate. And marketing doesn't tend to be eligible for most programs to hire a contractor unless you're getting a multi-million-dollar project grant where hiring a marketing agency to deliver a specific scope of work is a line item on a much more complex budget. So for early stage or small businesses, almost never. For larger stage companies that are better capitalized, that are looking to access larger programs, sometimes. So it depends. Just like everyone's least favorite answer, but it's the reality of the grant space. Almost nothing is absolute.
Exactly. And then it's also the planning piece that you talked about, right? So it's planning what you're looking for so that way, or what you need, so that way you can plan around what grants you could qualify for. So.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. That's awesome. All right. And then there was a question around, does the registration with Pocketed have an expiration? But I think you mentioned that it's a lifetime with the code. So we're good on that piece. And then, so I think what's available right now, or what a lot of people are familiar with, is the student hiring fund, or the funding for that. Could you just elaborate on that piece? I know we worked with Talented YYC here in Alberta. So that's the team that supports our entrepreneurs with aligning them with students. But could you just elaborate a little bit on the student hiring and the grant that's available for that?
Yeah, so there are tons of funding opportunities available to hire students. Your student always, without exception, has to be a Canadian citizen, permanent resident, or refugee. And there's 3 layers of eligibility as it relates to student hiring grants. I'll dive into those, but first I'll provide an overview of what you get. So with student hiring grants, you're going to get a student's wages subsidized for up to 16 weeks is generally what that term is. And they happen 3 times a year based on school semesters. So you can access funding for the fall, for the winter, and then for the summer. So the intakes tend to be 2 to 3 months before that student would start working for you. So you do need to plan quite a ways out, and almost always require you to apply for the program with your student already hired and identified. You can make those offers contingent on being approved for funding, because I get it can be intimidating to make an offer if you're not sure you're going to get the funding. And many of us need the funding to be able to actually have that person work. And they fund 50 to 70% of wages to a maximum of $5,000 to $7,000 per intern. And the amount you're funded depends on the demographics of your student. The government will provide more funding for equity deserving communities. So women in STEM, for example, or people of color, or Indigenous interns, and or people in rural communities. You'll often see additional funding at that 70% level offered for folks with priority demographics for the government to overcome historic and systemic inequities. And then you'll pay your intern on payroll, and then you will submit your wage, your pay stubs, at the end of that subsidy term, usually at the end, sometimes monthly, depending on the funder. And then they're going to pay you back the portion that they owe you. So again, that component of being well capitalized is true in this case. You have to be able to afford to pay the payroll and wait to get reimbursed. And some of them are super fast. Some of them are a little slower. They're all different. So there's 18 different organizations that distribute student funding, and they're all different. They all have different processes, different criteria, different areas of focus, industry focus, et cetera. So you do want to find the right funder for you. And in Pocketed, you'll see the ones that match to you as being eligible if there's an industry requirement. But then you need to think about the whole triangle of eligibility, which is your company has to be eligible, your role has to be eligible, and then the candidate or the student you hire has to be eligible. So that's the trifecta, and can make grants feel really complicated because there's a lot of detail in that. But it is, once you get the hang of it, it is just such a powerful and regenerative program. One of our favorite funders in the student space is called Venture for Canada. They're about to open their applications. You'll have to go through a webinar and get approved as an employer one time. And then every single time they do hiring grants, you're going to get an invitation to apply. And you can have, depending on the size of your business, multiple interns funded simultaneously. And you can often fund the same intern over multiple semesters. So we love it. We've had people that we fund 3 semesters through that program. And they will give you half of the money up front too. So for anyone that's a bit tighter on cash, they're a particularly great funder because they'll give you half of the grant amount up front to help you overcome that challenge with capitalization.
That's amazing. That's awesome. And yeah, there's lots of supporting organizations that will actually help you in accessing those funds as well. So that's great. Thank you for that. All right, so we're coming to time, but I want to end it off with one last question. I think that's a very important one. And it says, what is the best way to improve the competitiveness of an application? Any feedback, any suggestions that you have to share?
Yeah, so it depends a lot on the program that you're applying for. But what I would say is when you're looking at a grant and you're interested in applying, you want to look at what is the funder looking to fund. You often want to try to build a relationship with that funder and ask them the question, what are you looking to fund? What projects do you consider competitive? What projects have you funded in the past? What gets you excited right now when you're reviewing applications? Ask the question. Build the relationship. People always want to fund people. So when you build the relationship, it does help you get more information, but also be a name that they recognize when your application comes in. So building the relationship, understanding truly what they're looking to fund, not just what's stated, but what is the niche within the stated criteria that they're really looking to fund. And then I think as well, making sure that you're considering that benefit to Canada and that you can articulate really effectively, what is this project? Why does it matter? Why does it matter beyond just my company? So what is the broader impact that's going to result from this project being funded? So I think those are 3 specific things you can do to make sure that you can help make your own grant applications more competitive.
Awesome. Those are really great tips. And I apologize we didn't get to all the questions, but I will encourage the audience to check out Pocketed, explore. And I think, Brianna, we may have to bring you back because you've got lots of questions, lots of engagement happening in the chat here. So, yes.
Love it. Well, folks, you're all welcome to get in touch. I encourage you to create your free accounts. It's a resource that you can and should be using. Yeah. We feel very strongly about eliminating financial barriers for other founders, and this is part of how we do that. So we look forward to connecting with many of you. You can reach our team anytime, hello@hellopocketed.io, and we are here to support. Awesome. Bantu, thanks for having me out.
Thank you so much. And as we wrap up, my colleague, will post a link for our feedback survey in the chat. Again, thank you so much, Brianna. Super excited to have you, to host you, and thanks for sharing all of the information about grants. And we also would appreciate, to hear the feedback from the audience. So if you have a minute, please respond to the survey before you move on with your day, so we know what you thought about today's session. And remember to keep an eye out for an email within the next few days, which will include the recording, follow-up materials, and the registration links for our upcoming events. So here's what's upcoming for the next couple of weeks. On June 11th, we have an in-person session in Calgary, providing a success roadmap for entrepreneurs on the go, which is also available for virtual viewers through live stream. On June the 12th, we have a virtual session focused on navigating cyber threats and tips for small business security, and an in-person session in Edmonton focused on the 9 habits of sales success. On June 18th, we have an in-person session back in Calgary, providing insights on successful sales without feeling salesy, which is also available for virtual viewers through a live stream. And I'll also just say, make sure you subscribe to our newsletter at atbentrepreneurscenter.com to stay up to date on all of our events and relevant business articles. We're super excited that you guys were able to join us. Have a wonderful rest of your day, everyone, and we will see you soon. Thank you.